There is a mineral your body uses to complete over 300 enzymatic reactions every single day. It regulates your heartbeat. It governs your sleep. It controls whether your muscles contract or release. It determines how well your brain handles stress, how efficiently your cells produce energy, and how gracefully your blood sugar rises and falls after every meal. And right now, research suggests that somewhere between 50 and 80% of Americans over 60 are not getting enough of it. Not because this mineral is rare, not because it's locked behind a prescription, but because the plants that once delivered it in abundance, the greens, the seeds, the ancient grains our great-grandparents ate without thinking twice, have been systematically replaced by processed foods that contain almost none of it. Modern medicine calls the deficiency hypomagnesemia. Our ancestors called the solution dinner. Today, we're counting down 13 magnesium-rich plants drawn from the deepest wells of ancient wisdom, biblical traditions, Ayurvedic texts, Egyptian medicine, and indigenous knowledge, and confirmed by modern phytochemical research. Plants you can grow, forage, or find at any grocery store. Pay close attention to number 1. It's a plant most people in this audience have walked past in their own backyard and never once considered eating. And stay with us for number 7, because the story attached to that plant involves a Roman general, a siege that lasted 3 years, and a discovery that researchers are only now beginning to fully understand. Number 13. Lentils, the covenant grain. Before we talk about magnesium, we need to talk about a single bowl of red stew. In Genesis chapter 25, Esau returns from the field, famished, depleted. The text says, to the point of feeling he is about to die. What does he trade his birthright for? Not gold, not land. A bowl of lentil stew. Most readers focus on the transaction. Few stop to ask, why lentils? Why was this the food a starving man's body craved with that level of desperation? Lentils were not incidental to the ancient Near East. They were foundational. Archaeological evidence from sites in Syria and Turkey places lentil cultivation at 9,000 years ago, making them one of the first crops humanity ever deliberately grew. In ancient Egypt, lentils were found buried with the dead, placed in tombs as sustenance for the journey beyond. In 2 Samuel chapter 17, when David's army arrives, exhausted at Mahanaim, the gifts brought to restore the soldiers include lentils alongside barley, flour, and parched grain. This is military recovery nutrition, chosen not by accident, but by accumulated generations of knowledge about what actually rebuilt a depleted body. Indian Ayurvedic tradition has used lentils, specifically red masoor dal, for 3,000 years as a restorative food for vata imbalance, the constitution associated with nervous system depletion and anxiety. Traditional Chinese medicine classified similar legumes as kidney tonifying foods, directly linking their consumption to the organ system governing bone density and energy reserves, which, as it turns out, maps remarkably closely onto what magnesium actually does in the body. A single cooked cup of lentils delivers approximately 71 milligrams of magnesium, about 18% of the recommended daily intake for adults over 60, but the magnesium story in lentils is more interesting than the raw number suggests. Lentils also contain resistant starch and soluble fiber that slow glucose absorption, which matters because insulin dysregulation is one of the primary drivers of magnesium excretion through the kidneys. In other words, lentils help you retain the magnesium you consume from other sources, not just deliver their own. The phytate content in raw lentils does bind some minerals. This is the detail most guides skip entirely. To maximize magnesium absorption, soak dried lentils for 8 to 12 hours before cooking. Drain and rinse thoroughly, then cook in fresh water. This single step reduces phytate content by up to 30%. Add a strip of kombu seaweed to the cooking water, a practice used in Japanese macrobiotic cooking for centuries, and you further enhance mineral bioavailability. The lentils absorb trace iodine from the seaweed, while the seaweed's natural glutamic acid tenderizes the legume and breaks down remaining anti-nutrients. The ancient world didn't have X-ray crystallography. They had centuries of careful observation about what restored strength after exhaustion, the research is now beginning to confirm they were identifying something real. Number 12. Pumpkin seeds. In the pre-Columbian Americas, pumpkin seeds occupied a position of extraordinary importance that most Western nutritional history has almost entirely ignored. The Aztec civilization cultivated pumpkin, which they called ayotli, as one of the three sisters, alongside corn and beans. But the seeds held special status beyond the flesh. They were traded as currency, offered in ritual, and carried by Aztec warriors on long campaigns in small leather pouches. The reason becomes clear when you examine the nutritional density. A single ounce of dried pumpkin seeds, about a small handful, delivers 156 milligrams of magnesium. That is 37% of the daily recommended intake for an adult man in a package weighing roughly 28 grams. The Aztecs did not know what magnesium was. They knew that warriors who carried these seeds and ate them daily performed better in sustained physical conditions than those who did not. That is observational science. It just wasn't written in journals. Ancient Egypt tells a parallel story. Pumpkin seeds have been found in Egyptian tombs, dating to around 3000 BCE. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest preserved medical documents in human history, dating to approximately 1550 BCE, references cucurbit seeds in preparations for intestinal parasites and urinary complaints. Traditional Chinese medicine categorized pumpkin seeds as kidney-fortifying foods that supported the body's vital essence. Ayurvedic practitioners used them for prostate health and reproductive vitality, a use that, fascinatingly, aligns with modern research on cucurbitin, a compound in pumpkin seeds now being studied for its effects on benign prostatic hyperplasia. The key magnesium compound in pumpkin seeds is found in highest concentration in the raw, unhulled seed, not the roasted, salted commercial product you find at gas stations. Once pumpkin seeds are roasted above 160 degrees Fahrenheit, magnesium bioavailability decreases as heat-sensitive binding proteins are disrupted. The preparation wisdom is this: eat them raw or lightly toasted at no more than 150 degrees for 20 minutes. 1 ounce in the morning, on an empty stomach, slightly chewy, faintly grassy in flavor, with a clean nuttiness, allows absorption before stomach acid becomes occupied with a larger meal. Ancient cultures put the highest value seeds in the hands of the people who needed sustained performance most. Modern research is now examining the mechanisms behind what they already knew worked. Number 11. Moringa, the tree that fed armies. The Moringa oleifera tree appears across an astonishing range of ancient medical traditions, and the convergence is too consistent to dismiss as coincidence. In ancient India, the Sushruta Samhita, one of the foundational Sanskrit texts of Ayurvedic medicine, composed around 600 BCE, lists Moringa among plants used to treat conditions involving weakness, swelling, and depletion of vital energy. In traditional Egyptian medicine, Moringa oil, called bak oil, was used by ancient Egyptians and has been found in alabaster jars inside burial sites. Ptolemaic records indicate Moringa was cultivated along the Nile, specifically because of its value as both food and medicine. Ancient Greek physicians, including Dioscorides, referenced Moringa in De Materia Medica, the most influential herbal text of the classical world. What makes Moringa remarkable in the context of magnesium is not just the mineral content, though fresh Moringa leaves contain approximately 42 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams. It's the simultaneous delivery of 17 different amino acids, iron at levels that rival animal liver, and chlorogenic acid, a phenolic compound that specifically improves insulin sensitivity in peripheral tissues. The modern phytochemical finding that surprised researchers most was this: the concentration of active compounds in Moringa is dramatically higher in dried leaf powder than in fresh leaves, but only when dried below 140 degrees Fahrenheit. When Moringa is commercially processed with heat drying above that threshold, the isothiocyanates, the sulfur compounds responsible for Moringa's anti-inflammatory and metabolic effects, are destroyed. The product looks the same. The label reads the same. The biology is fundamentally different. The preparation the traditional world used was simple and correct. Leaves dried in the shade, then ground or crumbled. 1 rounded teaspoon of properly shade-dried moringa powder, stirred into cool or warm, not boiling water or broth. Consumed in the morning. The taste is earthy, slightly peppery, faintly reminiscent of green tea. Traditional cultures in West Africa and South Asia consumed this preparation daily, not as medicine, but as food. The distinction mattered. They weren't treating a deficiency, they were preventing one. Number 10. Nettle leaf. Stinging nettle has one of the most well-documented histories in all of herbal medicine and one of the most consistently underestimated nutritional profiles. In ancient Greece, Hippocrates documented over 60 medicinal uses for nettle. Roman soldiers reportedly brought nettle seeds to Britain, specifically to grow it in the cold northern climate, and historical accounts suggest they used the plant to stimulate circulation by deliberately brushing the fresh plant against cold limbs, a practice called urtication. That sounds extreme until you realize it was still being used in European folk medicine as recently as the 19th century for arthritis. In medieval European monasteries, nettle soup was a staple of the spring diet for a specific reason. It was one of the first fresh greens available after winter, when stored food supplies were depleted, and the community was showing signs of what we now recognize as mineral deficiency. The monks didn't call it that. They called it winter weakness. They treated it with nettle broth. And they were right to do so. 100 grams of fresh nettle leaf contains approximately 40 milligrams of magnesium, alongside significant iron, calcium, and potassium. But the compound that has drawn the most recent research attention is a lectin called UDA, urtica dioica agglutinin, which appears to modulate inflammatory immune pathways in ways that clinical researchers find worth continued investigation. The preparation detail, most guides, omit blanching fresh nettles for 60 seconds in boiling water, eliminates the sting completely, while preserving nearly all mineral content. The silica and iron concentration in nettle is actually enhanced by brief heat because it breaks down the cellular walls that bind these minerals. Dried nettle for tea, however, should be steeped in water that has been removed from the boil and allowed to cool for 2 minutes, approximately 190 degrees Fahrenheit, rather than boiling for 8 to 10 minutes. This preserves the chlorophyll and phenolic compounds that boiling would destroy. Medieval monasteries were the research institutions of their era. They documented, they observed, they refined their preparations over generations. The nettle protocols they developed weren't superstition. They were protocol. Number 9. Dandelion greens. Here is a plant that the modern lawn care industry has spent billions of dollars trying to eradicate from American yards, and it turns out to be one of the most nutritionally dense greens available in the temperate world. Dandelion taraxacum officinale appears in traditional medical texts from cultures that had no contact with one another. Chinese medicine has used dandelion root and leaf for over 1,000 years, primarily for liver and gallbladder complaints. Arab physicians of the 10th and 11th centuries, including Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, described dandelion as a treatment for bile obstruction and inflammatory liver conditions. Native American tribes, across at least 30 documented nations, used dandelion, a plant introduced to North America by European settlers, so rapidly and so extensively after its arrival that some ethnobotanists believe it spread partly through deliberate indigenous cultivation rather than accident. The nutritional data on dandelion greens is genuinely striking. A single cup of raw dandelion greens delivers approximately 20 milligrams of magnesium, alongside more vitamin K than almost any other common leafy green, more beta-carotene than carrots, and taraxacin, the bitter compound responsible for dandelion's characteristic taste, and also, according to recent liver research, for stimulating bile acid production in ways that support fat digestion and toxin clearance. The bitter flavor, which causes most people to reject dandelion greens on first taste, is actually the marker of bioactivity. The same sesquiterpene lactones that create bitterness are the compounds driving dandelion's liver-supportive effects, This is the counterintuitive truth that industrial food processing has trained us to miss bitterness in plants is frequently a signal of therapeutic value, not a flaw to be bred out or masked. Young spring dandelion leaves harvested before the plant flowers, from lawns that have not been treated with herbicide, are the mildest. Blanch them briefly. Dress with olive oil, lemon, and a pinch of sea salt. The taste is similar to arugula with a deeper, more mineral quality. Or steep 1 tablespoon of dried dandelion leaf in 8 ounces of hot water for 10 minutes. The resulting tea is amber, faintly earthy, with a clean bitterness that sharpens the appetite. Every major traditional medical system found this plant independently. That kind of convergence is worth taking seriously. Number 8. Amaranth, the grain they tried to erase. This is the entry with a story attached to it that most people have never heard, and it changes how you look at everything. In 1521, when Hernán Cortés completed his conquest of the Aztec Empire, one of his first administrative acts was to ban the cultivation of amaranth. Not corn, not beans. Amaranth. Why? Because amaranth was central to Aztec religious ceremony. It was mixed with human blood and shaped into figures of the gods, which were then eaten by participants in ritual. Cortés and the Spanish clergy identified the elimination of amaranth as a direct strike against indigenous spirituality. Farmers caught growing it faced punishment, sometimes execution. What they inadvertently did was nearly erase one of the most nutritionally complete grains in the pre-Columbian world. Amaranth, known to the Aztecs as huatli, was cultivated in Mesoamerica for at least 8,000 years. It provided roughly 80% of the caloric base for Aztec civilization alongside corn and beans. A single cooked cup of amaranth grain contains over 100 milligrams of magnesium, roughly 25% of the recommended daily intake, alongside a complete protein profile that includes lysine, an amino acid absent from most grains. This was not just food. This was the nutritional foundation of an empire, and the Spanish nearly destroyed it. The Aztecs were not alone in their reverence. The ancient Inca cultivated a related species. In Hindu tradition, amaranth leaves, known as rajgira, are consumed during religious fasting periods, specifically because they are considered complete nourishment during periods of dietary restriction. The leaves appear in Ayurvedic texts as a cooling, strengthening food for conditions of heat and inflammation. The phytochemical finding that most guides miss amaranth contains squalene, a compound more commonly associated with shark liver oil and olive oil, in concentrations that make it the highest plant-based source known to researchers. Squalene is a potent antioxidant that appears to protect against lipid oxidation in cell membranes, with research suggesting potential roles in cardiovascular protection. Cook amaranth as a porridge, 1 part grain to 3 parts water. Simmered for 20 minutes, until it reaches a consistency like polenta, faintly sticky, with a mild earthy flavor. For maximum magnesium absorption, add a squeeze of lemon during cooking. The mild acidity shifts the pH in a way that improves mineral solubility. Colonial suppression nearly erased this plant from human memory. 5 centuries later, the science is revealing exactly what was lost. If this kind of knowledge, the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern nutritional research, is the kind of thing you want more of, hit the like button and subscribe. Because what's coming in the next 6 entries includes a plant that Roman legions relied on for 3-year military campaigns. A biblical story of physical restoration that maps precisely onto what we now know about cellular hydration. And a wild green that most people in America have never tasted, but that rivals almost everything else on this list for magnesium concentration. We're just getting started. Number 7. Fenugreek. In Deutsche, the Roman siege of Masada, the fortress on a mesa above the Dead Sea, where nearly 1,000 Jewish rebels held out against the 10th Legion for 3 years, ended in one of the most haunting events in ancient history. What sustained the defenders through 3 years of siege conditions was documented by the historian Josephus, stored grain and, notably, Fenugreek, which had been cultivated on the plateau and kept in remarkable condition due to the extreme aridity. Fenugreek trigonella phonum graecum, appears in some of the oldest medical texts ever discovered. It was found in Tutankhamun's tomb. The Ebers Papyrus lists it as a treatment for fever and as an aid in childbirth. Ancient Greek physicians used it for lung complaints. In Ayurvedic medicine, it is called methi and appears in texts dating to approximately 2500 BCE as a treatment for digestive weakness, diabetes-like conditions, and joint inflammation. This level of convergence across Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Hebrew, and Ayurvedic traditions is unusual. Most plants earn one or two civilizations. Fenugreek earned all of them. The modern research focus has been on two primary compounds: 4-hydroxyisoleucine, an unusual amino acid found almost exclusively in fenugreek that appears to directly stimulate pancreatic insulin release, independent of blood glucose levels, and dioscinin, a steroidal saponin that has been studied for its role in lipid regulation. Clinical trials involving fenugreek supplementation in type 2 diabetic populations have produced results that researchers consider significant enough to warrant continued investigation, with some studies showing measurable improvement in fasting, glucose, and insulin sensitivity over periods of 8 to 12 weeks. A single tablespoon of fenugreek seeds contains 21 milligrams of magnesium. The seeds must be prepared correctly. Raw fenugreek seeds are intensely bitter, nearly inedible for most people. Soak 1 tablespoon of whole seeds in a cup of room-temperature water overnight. Then strain and drink the soaking water in the morning before eating. The water carries significant amounts of the water-soluble saponins and takes on a faintly maple syrup quality. Yes, the same compound that makes fenugreek smell like maple syrup is 4-hydroxyisoleucine, which is why some infant formula manufacturers use it as a flavoring. The soaked seeds themselves can be chewed, added to yogurt, or ground into flatbread. 3 years of siege conditions, a mountain fortress above the Dead Sea, and the defenders grew fenugreek. They knew exactly what they were doing. Number 6. Watercress. In the 19th century, watercress was not a garnish. It was medicine widely enough, recognized as such, that it was sold in London markets under the informal designation, poor man's bread. Consumed by the working class, not for its flavor, but for its known ability to restore vitality and clear chest congestion. Hippocrates reportedly built the first hospital on the Greek island of Kos, near a stream that supplied watercress, which he used extensively in treatments for blood and lung conditions. Persian physicians of the medieval Islamic Golden Age, including Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, described watercress as a treatment for liver obstruction and as a food that increased mental clarity. In traditional Korean and Chinese medicine, watercress appears as a cooling food used for conditions of excess heat, inflammation, and congestion. The compound that has attracted the most serious modern research attention is gluconestercin, a glucosinolate that converts in the body to phenylethyl isothiocyanate, PEITC, when the plant is chewed or chopped. PEITC has been the subject of significant cancer biology research, appearing to inhibit certain carcinogenic activation pathways in laboratory studies. This is not a cure claim. The research is preliminary and complex, but the mechanism is real. And it explains why watercress shows up so consistently in traditional healing systems that dealt with chronic degenerative conditions. Watercress also delivers 46 milligrams of magnesium per 100 grams, alongside vitamin K, vitamin C, and iodine, making it one of the few land plants to contain meaningful iodine concentrations, a consequence of its growth in mineral-rich stream water. The preparation imperative watercress must be eaten raw or barely wilted. Cooking above 120 degrees Fahrenheit destroys PEITC and significantly reduces vitamin K bioavailability. The ideal preparation is a simple salad dressed with olive oil and lemon, or watercress blended raw into a green smoothie. It tastes peppery, clean, with a mild mustard quality, assertive enough to know you're eating something with biological force behind it. Hippocrates didn't build his hospital next to a stream by accident. He built it next to a watercress stream. That is a specific and deliberate choice. The research is now beginning to understand why. Number 5. Seaweed. Long before humans understood the concept of a mineral, coastal civilizations around the world had identified the same basic truth. People who lived near the ocean and ate what grew in it were healthier, stronger, and longer lived than those who did not. Kelp and other brown seaweeds have been part of the Japanese diet for at least 1,500 years. The Okinawan population, historically one of the longest lived on Earth and studied extensively by longevity researchers, consumes seaweed daily in quantities that would surprise most Westerners. Traditional Irish coastal communities relied on dulse and carrageen moss for centuries, consuming them fresh from rocks and drying them for inland trade. The indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest consumed bull kelp as a salt substitute and nutrient source. Korean temple cuisine, a monastic food tradition dating back over 1,500 years, incorporates multiple seaweed varieties as the nutritional backbone of a plant-based diet that has sustained Buddhist monks through rigorous physical and mental practice. What these cultures had converged on was a class of organisms that concentrate ocean minerals at extraordinary rates. Kelp can contain up to 10 times the magnesium concentration per gram compared to terrestrial leafy greens. A single tablespoon of dried kelp flakes delivers approximately 12 milligrams of magnesium alongside the full spectrum of trace minerals, iodine, vanadium, fucoidin, that are almost entirely absent from land-grown vegetables in modern agricultural soils. The compound drawing the most intense current research interest is fucoidin, a sulfated polysaccharide found exclusively in brown seaweeds that has been studied for immunomodulatory properties, anticoagulant effects, and potential roles in supporting cellular autophagy. The internal cellular housekeeping process that declines with age. The research is early. The interest from serious laboratories is not. The preparation detail that matters. Iodine content in seaweed is substantial and variable. For people with thyroid conditions, particularly those already on thyroid medication, daily seaweed consumption should be discussed with a physician. For healthy adults without thyroid concerns, 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried flakes added to soups, broths, or rice provides the mineral benefit without iodine overload. The flavor is clean, oceanides, mildly salty, less intense than you might expect. The ocean's mineral library has been open for 1,500 years. Most Americans have never walked through the door. Number 4. Kale. Here is something most people don't know about kale. It gets sweeter after frost. The reason is, enzymatic cold temperatures trigger the conversion of starches in kale leaves to simple sugars, a survival mechanism the plant uses to prevent cellular damage from freezing. This same process also increases the concentration of certain glucosinolates and flavonoids, which means that kale harvested in December from a garden that has experienced several hard frosts is, in a measurable biochemical sense, more nutritionally dense than kale harvested in September. Traditional European farmers knew this. They left kale in the field through winter and harvested it precisely when the cold had done its work. This is a preparation principle encoded in agricultural tradition that industrial food supply chains have entirely erased because commercial kale is harvested for shelf life and appearance, not biochemical peak. Kale, specifically the traditional varieties like Lacinato, Siberian, and Red Russian, not the hybrid commercial varieties bred for uniformity, appears in Scottish Highland records from the 17th century as a fundamental winter survival food. A traditional Scottish saying held that to be out of kale was to be out of food. Entire meal structures were organized around it. The word kale in Scots eventually became synonymous with the midday meal itself. In ancient Rome, similar curly-leafed brassicas were described by Pliny the Elder as essential foods for maintaining strength during winter campaigns. The Roman Military Cookbook, a loose collection of military nutritional guidance, preserved in several shikha specifically as foods that maintained legionary stamina during cold weather operations. 100 grams of raw kale provides approximately 47 milligrams of magnesium, alongside substantial vitamin K, vitamin C, and sulforaphane, the compound formed when kale is chopped or chewed that activates the NRF2 pathway, one of the body's most important antioxidant defense mechanisms. The preparation precision that most guides skip chopping or massaging kale and letting it sit for 5 to 10 minutes before cooking or dressing allows the enzyme myrosinase to fully convert glucoraphanin into sulforaphane. Cooking before this resting period destroys myrosinase and produces almost no sulforaphane. 5 minutes of patience between cutting and cooking doubles the therapeutic value. Frost-touched kale. Properly rested after cutting. Cooked briefly at moderate heat. The ancient farmers who left it in the field through December were optimizing something they didn't have words to name. The biochemistry behind it is now clearly understood. Number 3. Chia seeds. The Aztec word for chia is quion, and the job it was most associated with, historically, was not warrior nutrition. It was the work of the messenger. In the Aztec Empire, professional long-distance runners, called Yao Tequihuaque, were responsible for carrying news and orders between cities across difficult terrain. These runners could cover up to 250 miles in a single relay system. The food they carried was predominantly chia, mixed with water and sometimes lime into a portable gel that could sustain hours of continuous physical effort. This specific application, chia mixed with water and lime, has a biochemical rationale that the Aztecs arrived at empirically, and that modern sports science has since validated. When chia seeds absorb water, they form a hydrogel through the action of mucilaginous polysaccharides, a gel that slows gastric emptying and produces a sustained, stable release of glucose into the bloodstream rather than a spike. The lime mild acidity activates the outer seed coat and enhances this hydrogel formation. The result is what modern sports scientists call a low glycemic sustained energy source, which is exactly what you need for continuous physical performance over long distances. 2 tablespoons of chia seeds contain approximately 95 milligrams of magnesium, nearly 25% of the recommended daily intake, alongside approximately 5 grams of omega-3 fatty acids as alpha-linolenic acid. The seeds are also among the highest plant sources of the amino acid tryptophan, the precursor to serotonin and melatonin, which may contribute to the sleep quality improvements that some chia consumers report. The preparation: the Aztec runners used chia soaked in water with a small squeeze of lime or lemon, left overnight to form a complete gel, is, nutritionally speaking, superior to any commercial chia product on the market. 2 tablespoons of chia seeds soaked in 8 ounces of water overnight with 1 teaspoon of fresh lime juice. By morning, the mixture has thickened to a loose pudding consistency with a neutral, slightly nutty flavor. Drink or eat it in the morning before the first meal. The runners who carried the messages of an empire across 250 miles of difficult terrain knew something worth knowing. The science behind it has taken 500 years to catch up. Number 2. Parsley. This entry requires us to stop and reconsider something most of us have been doing our entire lives. Parsley arrives on your plate as a garnish. You move it to the side. You may or may not eat it. It's treated as decoration green, faintly aromatic, nutritionally inconsequential. This is one of the more significant nutritional mistakes of modern food culture. Parsley Petroxylinum crispum was one of the most highly valued medicinal and culinary plants in the ancient Mediterranean world. In ancient Greece, parsley was associated with death and the underworld, but not in a morbid sense. It was used to crown victors at the Nemean and Isthmian Games. Not because it was common, but because it was sacred. Greek soldiers planted parsley on graves as a sign of respect. It was too important to be ordinary. In ancient Rome, parsley was consumed specifically after meals by everyone from soldiers to senators as a breath freshener and digestive aid. The Romans cultivated it extensively and exported it throughout the empire. In Talmudic tradition, parsley, specifically bitter herbs, plays a central role in Passover ritual. Consumed to recall the bitterness of bondage. Medieval European hospitals used parsley extensively for kidney and urinary complaints, a use that has been validated by modern research on apigenin and luteolin. The primary flavonoids in parsley that appear to exert diuretic effects and support kidney filtration. Now, here is the number that should change. How you look at the garnish on your plate. 100 grams of fresh parsley, about half a cup packed, contains approximately 50 milligrams of magnesium, but the number that matters more is this. That same serving contains more vitamin K than almost any other commonly consumed food, more than kale, more than spinach. Vitamin D, activates osteocalcin, the protein that directs calcium into bone tissue rather than allowing it to calcify in arterial walls, which means parsley is not just a magnesium source. It's a calcium traffic director. And for adults over 60, for whom cardiovascular calcification and bone density loss are both active concerns, that combination of magnesium and vitamin K in a single food is clinically significant. The preparation secret, parsley's volatile oils, including myristicin and apiol, are most bioavailable when the herb is freshly chopped and consumed raw or at room temperature, not heated. Heat volatilizes these compounds within seconds. The ancient practice of consuming parsley fresh, as a post-meal digestive, or in fresh salads, was biochemically correct. Eat a full handful of fresh flat-leaf parsley. Not curly, the flat-leaf variety has substantially higher concentrations of active compounds. Rough chop it. Dress it with olive oil and lemon. Eat it as a small side with your main meal. What you've been moving to the edge of your plate is one of the most nutritionally dense things on it. Number 1. Nettle seed. You know about nettle leaf. Most people in this space have heard of it. But there is a part of the nettle plant that even experienced herbalists rarely discuss, a part that traditional European medicine elevated above the leaf itself for specific conditions, and that modern adaptogenic research is only now beginning to examine seriously. Nettle seed. Urtica dioica seeds, the tiny, dust-fine seeds, produced by the stinging nettle plant in late summer, have a documented history in European folk medicine that is almost entirely separate from the better-known leaf. While the leaf was used as a blood-building tonic and general mineral supplement, the seed was used specifically for conditions involving depletion, exhaustion, and what traditional practitioners called kidney weakness, a category that in traditional European medicine encompassed fatigue, reduced physical stamina, diminished libido, and poor recovery from illness or physical exertion. The 16th century English herbalist Nicholas Culpeper, whose complete herbal remains one of the most comprehensive records of European folk botanical medicine, described nettle seeds as warming and fortifying to the kidneys, recommending them for consumption in wine or broth for people who had been weakened by long illness. Scottish Highland traditions preserved nettle seed use even longer, with records of seed decoctions being given to elderly community members who were failing to thrive after winter. What modern researchers have found is genuinely surprising. Nettle seeds appear to contain compounds, including certain lectins and sterols that act as adaptogens, helping the body regulate its stress response through effects on the HPA axis. More specifically, early research suggests that nettle seed may have a restorative effect on kidney tubular cells, the specific cells responsible for magnesium reabsorption in the renal system. In other words, nettle seed may not just deliver magnesium. It may help the kidney hold on to the magnesium you're already getting from everything else. This is the mechanism that traditional practitioners were observing without the language to describe it precisely. When they said nettle seed strengthened the kidneys, they were documenting a clinical observation. The biology behind that observation is only now being mapped. Preparation: fresh nettle seeds, harvested in late summer when they are green and slightly sticky, can be eaten directly 1 to 2 teaspoons as a daily tonic. They have a mild, slightly green flavor with a faint nuttiness. Dry seeds can be steeped in warm water for 15 minutes or infused into honey. 1 tablespoon of seeds per jar. Left for 4 to 6 weeks. The resulting nettle seed honey is amber, faintly herbal, with a deep warmth that you feel more than taste. If you forage your own, harvest only from plants you are certain have not been sprayed with herbicides or pesticides. In late August to September, when seeds are fully formed but not yet brown and dry, The most powerful nutritional tool on this entire list is one most people have walked past without a second glance. Growing wild at the edges of streams and disturbed ground, and the part of it they were already ignoring has a mechanism that modern research is only beginning to understand. Every plant on this list has something in common that has nothing to do with magnesium. Every single one of them is more nutritionally potent in its whole, minimally processed form than in any extracted, refined, or commercially standardized version. The active compounds in nettle seed are disrupted by aggressive drying. The sulforaphane in kale requires an intact enzyme that cooking destroys. The PEITC in watercress forms only when the cell walls are broken by chewing or chopping, not when the plant is pureed commercially. The fucoidan in seaweed is concentrated in the whole plant and diluted in most commercial extracts. The magnesium in lentils is partially locked behind phytates that soaking removes, but commercial canned lentils are not soaked before cooking. This is the consistent pattern across the entire history of botanical medicine. The processing that makes food commercially convenient is often the same processing that removes the biological intelligence that made the food valuable in the first place. Our ancestors didn't have a choice about whole food preparation. They ate what they could grow, forage, and prepare with fire and water and stone. It turns out that the constraint was a gift. We have a choice now, and the research is making that choice increasingly clear. The plants on this list are not supplements. They are not products. They are food with a history measured in millennia, validated by cultures that had no contact with one another, and yet arrived at the same conclusions again and again. The question worth sitting with after this video is this: if our great-grandparents ate this way without thinking about it, without research journals, without nutritional science, and they were right, what else did the transition to industrial food quietly take away that we haven't noticed yet? If that question stays with you, subscribe. Share this with someone you care about, a parent, a sibling, a friend over 60 who deserves this information. And leave a comment which plant on this list surprised you most, and what topic would you like us to explore next, because ancient wisdom is a very deep well, and we're just beginning to draw from it.